Hello and welcome back to another video that nobody asked for. Today I'm gonna do my top 20 favorite albums of 2020. Y'all don't need me to tell you how rough of a year it has been for the entire world. It has been an extremely painful and exhausting one, to say the least, and all of the horrific events that have taken place and are still ongoing from 2020 have affected everyone in different ways, and I am so extremely privileged to be able to say that I've stayed safe and healthy throughout the year and have been able to use a lot of my time trapped inside to listen to music and be able to make the list that I'm going to share today. I'm also so grateful for the many incredible artists that have produced stuff this year for us to be able to enjoy under such bleak and stressful circumstances. There were a lot of great releases this year from artists that were new to me and from others that I have loved for a very long time. So I guess that is one good thing to come out of 2020 if I were to pick something. So without further ado, I'm going to go over my 10 honorable mentions in no particular order, and then jump into my top 20 list in descending order. Hopefully you enjoy this video. It's gonna be very long, but we're gonna make it through. And yes, let's just get into it. Alright, so I'm gonna get my 10 honorable mentions out of the way real quick, which are albums that didn't make this list but are also extremely worthy of checking out, and those are Ungodly Hour by Chloe Halle or Chloe X Halle, Future Nostalgia by Dua Lipa, What's Your Pleasure by Jessie Ware, Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and The Alchemist, Modus Vivendi by 070 Shake, Making a Door Less Open by Car Seat Headrest. I don't care what anyone says about this pick. What Kind of Music by Tom Misch and Yusuf Days, The Album by Tiana Taylor, Song Machine Season 1 by Gorillaz, and The Ascension by Sufjan Stevens. Yeah, so those were all by honorable mentions, and now I'm going to jump into my list starting at number 20. It is quite rare at this point in time for me to be a big fan of more stripped down folk music. It's something I'm still working on, but something in me really loves this album by British singer-songwriter Laura Marling. I think a big reason for that is because of her beautiful voice. It is so soothing and consoling and timeless. The instrumentals are really nice on this album as well, but I think mainly act as a perfect setting for her vocals and lovely but also heart-wrenching songwriting. This album talks about some very personal and intimate topics, such as addressing her hypothetical daughter about the trials of growing up as a young girl, as well as the pain and complexity of love and relationships in general. The tracklist goes from some softer songs to more upbeat, playful tunes, and then there are some very tragic and bleak moments as well. The song Held Down manages to tell such a painful narrative with such a lively tone. I love the guitars and the way the vocals layer on top of each other. Strange Girl is a very wholesome song. It kind of seems like she's speaking to her fictional daughter, picking on her a bit for trying on different personas and identities in order to figure herself out. Only the Strong is a subtly heartbreaking song, while also being faintly optimistic about moving on from a painful event. The title track is an insanely moving song. It is the soft ballad that she herself described as how she would have armed a younger version of herself against some of the experiences that a young woman has in the world. Seems like that version of herself is going through a lot of shit and perhaps losing some of her naivete and innocence along the way, and she just wants to protect her from all of that. It's really touching and sad, and these strings definitely add to that. Both The End of the Affair and Hope We Meet Again feel like pretty brutally honest songs, just reflecting on two people going their separate ways, but in like an eerily cordial kind of way. And as a whole, it's a very somber, wistful album. Laura Marling has such a way with words. She just sounds very wise, and like I trust her a lot while listening to her, which sounds kind of weird. The whole thing is just very comforting, and I really recommend it to everyone, even if you don't normally like pretty bare folk music, because you might be surprised with how much her voice and her lyrics resonate. This album has definitely reignited my love for Archie Marshall. His debut, 6 Feet Beneath the Moon, is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's in a lot of indie starter pack memes, but I think for a good reason. It's undeniable that he has a very distinct voice. We all know his signature throaty growls that I think are what makes him stand out so much as a vocalist, and are something I really love about his music. Sadly, I was not that into The Ooze from 2017. I really like some songs, but the album overall was just too long and wandering with a lot of filler, and I just think I wanted an album with a similar aesthetic but slightly more gripping, and I think that's what Man Alive is. The album is shorter and more concise and focused. Archie's crooning, dejected vocals are still there, but I find the instrumentation just to be more powerful and energetic. I think the biggest factor that attracts me to a lot of songs are the slick and earwormy guitar melodies on so many songs, like Alone Omen 3, Super Marsh, Stoned Again, and Energy Fleets. Even though these songs are pretty simple and skeletal, if the guitar sounds pleasing, then I'm totally sold. A lot of his lyrics seem to be about him being a perpetual hopeless romantic. Perfecto Miserable sounds like him sappily pouring out how his partner is the only thing that makes sense to him. I got really excited when I found out Don't Let the Dragon Drag On is a reference to Adventure Time. The lyrics talk a lot about like trapping yourself inside, binging a show all day and not feeling guilty about it. It's like silly, but also depicts that aspect of mental illness really well, just feeling super sluggish and isolated. Other songs like Theme for the Cross are really a vibe. They're just like street sounds. I just imagine being a little buzzed, walking around semi-crowded streets at night, watching the world go by. I think overall, King Cruel albums are the perfect soundtrack for, you know, a very contemplative atmosphere. I love Archie's voice and personality. For whatever reason, a lot of songs in this album just seem more structured and easier to latch onto than on The Ooze. There are so many incredibly beautiful and endearing songs on the album that make me feel quite cozy and at ease, and I'm definitely gonna keep enjoying this album for a while. Atrium Ltd is a band from the UK, and their sound is a lot of different genres: art pop, art rock, post-punk, which I'm not all too familiar with, but from what I can tell, their sound is quite derivative of big British bands like Joy Division, The Cure, New Order, and all that, but they definitely put a modern twist on that stuff, combining it with a newer pop sound and even trap stuff sometimes. I really liked their EP from 2018. Henry Spychalski's vocals are super passionate and seductive, and their sound is very flamboyant and theatrical. It wasn't really up my alley at first, but it definitely grew on me. I was intrigued and I thought I would enjoy a full-length album if I gave it a shot, and I definitely did. I really love this album, and I love how just full of life and flashy and extravagant it is. I love the energy on Loaded. To the Door is also one of the hardest songs ever. I know that both of these songs would just go super crazy live. One of the biggest selling points about the album as well is the storytelling. For example, Satan, Luella, and I is a very grand and captivating ballad. I really love the choir in the chorus. The lyrics seem to describe someone who's seen a lot of evil but finds this one pure soul he wants to hold on to and convinces himself they can like take on the world together. Mikey's song is very beautiful too. I definitely feel the pain and the longing in those lyrics. And then of course there's the incredible back-to-back narrative of Joanna and Where's Joanna? In these tracks, the narrator grapples with gender dysphoria and describes Joanna as this female figure that lives inside him that he keeps trying to like beat down and tell to go away. And then on Where's Joanna? It's like the aftermath where he murders her and feels this guilt and paranoia of anyone finding out. It's just very heartbreaking and simultaneously such a unique and powerful way to express such complex emotions about this issue, and I really admire it. Nobody Stays in Love is another highlight. The lyrics are super fucking blunt and forthright. Then Blank Slate is an incredibly powerful and uplifting song too. It just talks about taking control of your own life and saying you can do whatever you want at any given moment, which is a very empowering message that I enjoy a lot. And I'm just glad this album grew on me. I think every song is so unique and monumental. The band has so much personality and I connect with a lot of their messages, but even if I can't, it's like their storytelling is so well done and immaculate that I just can't help but be stunned by everything when I listen to them, and I definitely think they deserve more attention. I won't say I'm the biggest fan of quartet or purely ambient instrumental music in general. I like a lot of electronic music, but I don't love a lot of projects that don't have vocals on them, which is something I'm not proud of, but it's definitely a genre that I am gonna keep exposing myself to and incorporating into my sphere more and more over time. But Kieran Hebden's discography is pretty loaded. The few albums I have listened to I enjoy a lot, especially as music to work to, like when I'm writing or drawing, and it's like really cool, slightly more elevated background music. Which sounds kind of lame, but I mean, there are definitely a lot of times where I'm listening and find part of a song to just be incredibly intricate and beautiful, and it just makes me want to give the album more listens in different settings and headspaces, but it's definitely a work in progress still. However, 16 Oceans is an album that particularly stands out to me. Quartet's music is like micro house and intelligent dance music, which is a really pretentious music term, but it makes sense. His songs are like bangers, but like elegant, dreamy, sophisticated bangers. For example, the opener School fucking slaps. I also really like Baby, Teenage Birdsong, and Insect Near Piha Beach, which is literally one of my favorite songs of the year. I like how a lot of songs will start off with this pretty standard pulsing club beat and then just keep growing into something even more layered and full of life and nuances. And I feel like that song is a perfect representation of that. The way the strings just build up and sound kind of wonky at first, but then like eventually line up perfectly with the original beat is so fulfilling and delightful. I will say that unfortunately the back end of this album tends to slip past me a bit. It gets way more ambient and serene and kind of sounds like they're meant to just like set a scene in the way that they're like a bunch of tranquil field recordings and stuff. They're not my favorite, but I will admit they're still very lovely and peaceful. And the album as a whole just feels very refreshing and relaxing at the same time. I said in a blog post that it feels like falling asleep in a field of flowers, which I don't know why anyone would not want. So I definitely recommend checking it out, and I'm definitely going to keep listening to more of Quartet's music in hopes of liking other albums as much as this one. Amine is a pretty cool guy. I'm not crazy about his first release, but I do think it's pretty fun, playful, quirky pop rap and trap. I did, however, genuinely love 1.5. I think there's so many great songs on that. It gets a little more creative with the production as well, and it's also pretty lighthearted, but I personally love when he gets more deep and vulnerable with his emotions, like on Doctor Whoever and Why. I just admire the way he explains his feelings as he gets more famous. And I honestly wasn't expecting anything too crazy with Limbo, but I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought. I definitely feel like it's his best album by far, and it takes a lot of my favorite things about Amine's music and presents them at their best. I really like the slightly weirder production on songs like Burden, for example. I enjoy the progression and soulfulness of Roots with Amine singing and the Jid feature. I also dig the bubbly production on Compensating. Jimmy is a pretty badass song too. I know it samples from an Old Dirty Bastard song with the vocals, and I feel like would have worked well as the opener to the album. Pressure in My Palms is definitely my favorite song by far, maybe because the production has such Big Fish Theory vibes. That hard-hitting experimental trap sound is my weakness in like any kind of music I listen to. Fetus is a super real song. I like the eerie and screeching production. He talks about not knowing if it's responsible to bring a child into the world. Richie and Groggs from Injury Reserve give their own insight as well. Rest in peace, Groggs. It really fucking sucks that he couldn't be around to hear this track, but it is a very powerful and admirable song altogether. My Reality is a cool closer. My brother made me realize how heavily inspired by Kanye it is, which didn't register at first, but it does sound like it. But it's a nice track, and I think it wraps up the album well by reflecting on everything he's done and moving forward. It's a really great project overall, and some songs are better than others, but there isn't any song that I don't like. I like the different directions he takes, exploring different styles and getting a little bit more experimental, but nothing feels like half-assed or unsure of itself. It's all really bold and well executed. Again, I like when Amine gets more personal and in touch with his emotions. I think my favorite verses from him come when he's being super honest and candid, but he's also good at like flipping the switch and just pulling really clever and funny one-liners as well. So he's just a lot of fun to listen to all around, and I can't wait to see what else he puts out in the future. So it's been a few years since Joji shed himself of his filthy Frank pink suit, and we've gotten a few projects since then. His style takes on a mostly chill, lo-fi, pop rap kind of sad boy sound. Personally, I was not too crazy about his initial stuff like the In Tongues EP, but I do think Ballads 1 from 2018 was not bad at all. There's a lot of really catchy songs, and he has a very soothing and mellow voice that he doesn't exert too much, but definitely fits with the type of vibe he wants to create. Still though, he had yet to kind of release anything that really blew me away or kept me coming back, but Nectar definitely took me by surprise. It seems to pick up straight from where Ballads 1 left off, but it sounds like a lot more work was put into really elevate and refine his sound. The opener is super grand and melodramatic and has these very passionate vocals and strings and pianos. I can't get over the beat and the guitar lick on TikTok. And the super down-pitched vocals work really well too. Daylight is a very lively and vivid track, probably because of the Diplo production, but it features some very soulful singing. I also liked the high-pitched vocals and melody on Run, as well as Sanctuary. I love the airy waves of synths, and I just like have to sing the chorus every time, even though I suck at singing. Pretty Boy is also cool. It's one of the edgier, darker moments on the album. I notice how a lot of the lyrics deal with how he deals with fame and trying not to lose himself in the thrill of it all. The Lil Yachty feature works surprisingly well here as well. Afterthought is probably my most played track. It is so fucking catchy. I just love the beat and vocals so much. The lyrics are pretty damn vague though, especially Benny's part, even though she does sound great too. But I cannot deny how relentlessly I've played this song last year. 777 is hella fun too. It's very animated and kind of video game-like. And Like You Do is a very somber and soulful ballad as well. So it's just a good mix of upbeat pop and R&B songs with more mellow and soft ones. I definitely think it's better than his last album. My biggest gripes with it really are that it does get a bit one-dimensional at times and the lyrics are quite cliche and surface level, but I can still appreciate how open and honest he is, and I'm sure that he is expressing his feelings in a way that feels cathartic to him, so that's cool. But I think going forward he can just really improve his songwriting. But mainly I can't deny how infectious this whole album is to me, and I'm excited to keep watching his growth and evolution as an artist. I definitely think he has a lot more potential and is, you know, gonna keep getting better. If you aren't a fan of Run the Jewels already, I suggest you get on that because they have 4 incredibly solid albums under their belts at this point. The duo is pretty much a staple in experimental and political hip-hop. Killer Mike and LP are insane rappers, and LP is an amazing producer. On every album you can find hardcore beats and really solid bars that can be quite funny and goofy, but also extremely politically potent with their commentary on a vast array of social issues, whether it be race, capitalism, corrupt government, resisting authority, thinking for yourself, all that kind of stuff. Their way of threading their views into their music obviously carries over onto the new album in a time that definitely really needed figures with a platform to spread important messages and sort of embody a lot of the rage happening during the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. And I think they did that perfectly on RTJ4. Sonically, I wouldn't say it's super different from previous albums. You know, they say don't fix what isn't broken. That is true to an extent because there are some surefire bangers on this. The first 4 tracks specifically I can listen to in a row over and over again. I love the dark piano melody on Ooh La La, and I really fuck with the beats on Out of Sight. I really like the halfway beat switch up on Holy Kalamafuck, and Walking in the Snow is one of the most politically charged tracks. It has the lyrics, "And you so numb, you watch the cops choke out a man like me, until my voice goes from a shriek to whisper I can't breathe." And apparently that was written in reference to Eric Garner's death several years ago, but of course is a line that was all over the news and social media during the George Floyd protests, so it's just incredibly eerie that he wrote that before those happened, and definitely shows the lack of and even direct opposition to progress that we've made since then. Just is another powerful track as well. Pharrell sounds really good, as well as Sac de la Roca, even though I've yet to listen to Rage Against the Machine, but I like every time he's been featured on RTJ songs. For some reason, I haven't been able to get as much into some later tracks like Never Look Back and Pulling the Pin, just because they feel sort of drawn out and less gratifying. But as a whole, it's a really solid and concise project without too much to complain about. They always come through with really exciting albums that express their views in very smart and empowering ways, so just so much respect goes out to them for that. I do wish maybe they would get a little bit more unpredictable with their sound in the future, but it's okay for now because I still haven't gotten tired of them yet. I'm so glad that I discovered Rav this year, and grateful to my brother for putting me onto him. He is the founder of the Exociety label, and I haven't listened to every album by him on Spotify, but he has been making stuff since 2015, which is really cool, and I'm glad he's pulling in new listeners like me recently. Before listening to Skin, I thought from the cover that the album would be like lo-fi chill hip-hop beats just because of the art style, but it's not that exactly. It's kind of like abstract jazzy rap, like this brand of rap that's very dreamy, but also talks a lot about like real shit and is super introspective. And this project has Rav, Kill Bill, and Square, and I think showcases all of their skills and personalities super well. They all play off each other really nicely, which makes for a super enjoyable listening experience. The project as a whole is very easy on the ears. There's a lot of catchy, vibey beats, but each song also has its own unique production and sampling. Half-Life is my favorite. I have replayed the shit out of it this year or last year, and the album gets super emo a lot of the time. I easily resonate with so many lyrics, especially those that deal with anxiety and depression and struggling with self-worth and uncertainty about the future. Literally every verse in every song is so loaded with relatable stuff that I'll just stop while listening and be like, fuck, I feel that so hard. And that is a huge reason why I love this project so much. But about I'm Onto Me, which I really love the title and cover of. This project is just under Rav, but it also features Kill Bill and Square on several songs again. It's not drastically different from Skin, but I think the track list is more varied in sound. I fucking love Me Never. That's probably my favorite song because the lyrics are like so trolly. The chorus is like, they tell me do better, be better, who, me, never. And it's like, I'm perfect, I don't have any problems. Molasses, I also love. It definitely feels very woozy and lethargic, and so the name describes it well. Prosthetic Self-Love is also such a good track. It kind of talks about tricking yourself into achieving self-love but still being insecure, and I love the diabolical kind of sound of it. I also love the lyrics and Rav's shouting delivery on Channel F, and then I dig the more upbeat jazzy sound of Dead End. I love the sentiment of that song, as well as To My Future Self, where he expresses fear of the future and moving forward in life. And I really love the final lines on that song as well. I'm basically obsessed with these two albums and fully on the Exociety train. I am in awe of so many things that Rav says and the way he expresses his thoughts. They just hit so hard with me and genuinely help me work through my own feelings. Even on the surface though, each album sounds just so great. You could not even pay attention to the lyrics and enjoy it just as much, but I'm definitely excited to keep following Rav and friends and listening to some older stuff and future projects. Young Lean is a cloud rap artist from Sweden. I know the term cloud rap is a little memey at this point, even though it's not a new genre by any means, but definitely blew up a lot last year with like all the Drain Gang stuff. I'm surprised that I like this new Young Lean album so much because I personally find the handful of his earlier projects that I've listened to be particularly grating and mind-numbing and just not my cup of tea. But I will say though that I really like Stranger from 2017. There are some amazing songs on that, and so far is the only album I've listened to that I like as much as Stars. This album has a lot of the same qualities as previous ones, but just with better production in my opinion. I know White Armor produced this album as well as some other ones, but he really outdid himself this time. As with a lot of cloud rap, the sound and vocals effectively translate the feeling of being under the influence of a lot of things, kind of like a feeling of euphoria and like being in a trance, but also very erratic and paranoid at the same time, kind of like on the opener My Agenda. Yayo has a similar feel. I like it more because of the more prominent trap beat and earworm of a chorus, even though the lyrics sadly describe a coke addiction and how he feels about the music industry. But yeah, I really also love Violence, how it shoots off so sharply and swiftly, and Young Lean's faster rapping. Acid at 7-Eleven is another one of my favorites. I originally perceived it as this buoyant, twinkly, silly song, but according to Genius, he wrote it about witnessing a violent and traumatic event at 7-Eleven while being on acid, so it definitely adds a darker tone to that song. I'm also a fan of the hard-hitting yet delicate Ice Heart, and of course Pikachu is a very cute song too. It has a very light and effervescent sound, and it's hard not to feel like you're floating on clouds. The more overt trap sound of Sunset Sunrise is also very appealing, and the lyrics get particularly spiritual and otherworldly, which is pretty fitting for the sound. And Put Me in a Spell has a similar drowsy and hypnotic feel. On the whole, I think the album is really well done. It has a really nice flow from the more ambient to aggressive songs. I think the vocals could be a little bit more compelling so that they're not so monotonous, but either way, the album sounds so ethereal and dreamlike and trance-inducing that I just found myself really attracted to it for some reason. It would be cool to see him keep collabing with Drain Gang, maybe doing a full project together in the future. That'd be cool, but I'm totally up for solo projects in the future as well if they're as good as this one. I'm cheating again by including 2 projects in one spot, but both of these are pretty short and pretty much EP length, so it counts as one spot. Alright, I'm really basic and fucking love Denzel. He's a really easy rapper to love and pretty much kills it in everything he does. He's got something for whatever vibe you're looking for, whether it be really dark and grimy like Imperial, or more conceptual like Taboo, or really fun and energetic like Zoo or Unlocked. He is just so expressive and pulls off every sound so effortlessly. And he also really loves anime and wears Hunter x Hunter merch, so how can I not love him? First, I'm gonna talk about the Blood In, Blood Out mix, which was released on YouTube, and it's basically a 13-minute stream of dark hardcore rap songs that all flowed together to be one continuous thing. It's super raw and aggressive and has some really unique and experimental beats. It goes so extremely hard all the way through, and every song is so insane and full force. Others have pointed this out, but it does seem to channel the sound of his 13 EP from 2017, which I see because it has a lot of the same futuristic and ominous production. I love that EP as well, so it makes sense that I love this. The features are all really cool too. I don't know everyone, but I really like Ghostmane on Charlie Sheen and City Morgue on Evil Twin. I think they all have really great verses and match Denzel's energy super well. I'm conflicted because I wish this was longer, but it's also so perfect as it is that I almost don't want to ruin it, but it literally blows my mind every single time, and honestly, just please listen to it if you watch this video. Now I want to talk about Unlocked. It's a very straightforward project that's only 17 minutes, but it's definitely a ride from start to finish. I would basically explain this as like Denzel and Kenny just flexing super hard and making a really fun project that's like bangers back to back. It's definitely something to listen to get you hype. Back before COVID, when I would listen to this on my way to class, it was definitely a super invigorating way to start my day. The sound tends to be quite wonky and experimental, with like frequent vocal distortions making Denzel sound super high-pitched or low-pitched, and the skits threaded between each track. I know Kenny Beats tweeted after MF Doom passed, which also rip to a absolute fucking legend. He tweeted that they talked about MF Doom a lot while making this album, and I can definitely see the influence. And I think Denzel is also freestyling a lot on the album, which is crazy because he has so many good bars and one-liners all over the place. I'm not gonna say Kenny's production is like super mind-blowing. The beats are pretty accessible, but for me it's just like the whole thing is so replayable. I always just would want to listen to this project when I wanted something like energetic but lighthearted at the same time. Yeah, so it was a good year for Denzel, even though he didn't release a full-length album, but I enjoyed these 2 smaller things very much, and I highly recommend them to everyone. I think it's pretty impossible for Charlie to release a bad album at this point. You just know that whatever she puts out is gonna be treading new ground, taking more risks, and expanding her horizons. Hyperpop is the trendy kind of umbrella term to describe her sound. It kind of encompasses everything from electronic to art pop to experimental club music. She does a lot, but at the same time, her sound is very uniquely her own, I think, and definitely sets the standard for a lot of up and coming pop artists. I liked the last album, Charlie, a lot, but I personally still hold Pop 2 as my favorite release by her. Charlie does have a lot of amazing songs though, and it was definitely her grandest work by far. The production and composition was super masterful on a lot of songs. You could just tell that so much went into that album and it was very labored over. But how I'm feeling now is almost like the flip side of that. Her fans got to see everything come together from the ground up. She was tweeting like Notes app screenshots and started releasing random singles, letting her fans make the cover art. It really felt like she just needed to make stuff and connect with people or else she was gonna fucking explode. And it really all worked out because every song on this album is extremely raw, rough around the edges, and packed with emotion. Each song seemed to express a different aspect of how she was feeling during quarantine. The Pink Diamond is an amazing opener. Forever is very wholesome. I love the swooshing synths in it. I don't like Claws as much as a lot of other people. I think the beat kind of sounds like a typical industrial Sophie inspired song, but that doesn't mean it's not still really good. I Finally Understand is probably my favorite song. I fucking love the beat and how her voice kind of skips and glitches over it. I also like the line my therapist said, I hate myself really bad, because that is a mood. C 2.0 is really catchy and quite emotional too. It really just talks about missing your friends. And Anthems definitely has that same energy, but way more unrestrained. If it's not quarantine in a song, I don't know what is. I love that the beat is like so hype and electric, and the lyrics are just like, I'm so bored, wake up late, eat some cereal, etc. She just talks about getting super existential, and I feel like everyone can relate to it. The album is really like a product of its time, but also just outside of that, an incredible album in general. It's wild knowing that she made this within the span of a couple months while being trapped inside. I think it just shows how untamable her inclination to create stuff is, especially when under a lot of stress. And it's just mind-blowing, and I fucking love her so much, and I hope we can hear some of these songs live one day, as trippy as that will be. This is the sister album to There Existed an Addiction to Blood that came out the same time as last year. As much as I love that album and its abundance of experimental horror movie inspired bangers, I feared maybe that this project would seem a little redundant, but that wasn't exactly the case. Yes, the themes and ideas are very similar, but the songs are pretty much all completely new and different and provide just an entirely different experience. And I honestly might like it equally as much, if not more, than the last one. I can really only describe Visions of Bodies Being Burned as a masterpiece. It literally blows my mind. It is so dense and intricately crafted down to every sound and word. Daveed Diggs is probably one of the best rappers alive at the moment. He raps so fucking fast, but also enunciates so well that you can still understand everything he says usually. And his storytelling is literally unmatched. There's just so much to dissect in every verse on every song. And of course, William Hudson and Jonathan Snipes come through with immaculate, scary ass production that creates the perfect setting for said storytelling. Every track basically mimics a horror movie with multiple references to classic horror films, or just creates its own narrative and relays it in a super cinematic way. I'm not even into like classic horror movies really, but I still think the descriptions are so compelling, and I'm so impressed by how skillfully the tropes and references are weaved into every single song. Like on 96 Neve Campbell playing off like the Scream movies, and She Bad referring to the Blair Witch Project. Other songs like Check the Lock Eaten Alive, Looking Like Me, and Enlacing all tell even more scary stories, but about paranoia, getting eaten by monsters, cannibalism, having a horrific drug trip, and more. But that hopefully gives an idea of what the album sounds like. There are also a number of politically charged songs like Pain Every Day and Body for the Pile. David is often one to express his takes on social issues, wow, in very potent and powerful ways. And it's very fitting for the times that we're in right now. On the whole, it's another incredibly dense and masterful body of work. It's crazy to me that they still had so much horror movie inspired material in them left to make an album equally as vivid and thought-provoking as the last. It makes me so continually excited for everything that Clipping puts out in the future, because I just trust that they will never disappoint. And even if they do put out something that's not like quite for me, I know it'll be incredibly unique and something that other people aren't doing, so I'm just really here for it. Leanne Lahaves was a new artist to me, and I thought I'd give this album a listen after seeing it everywhere. I wasn't sure what to expect, but her sound is neo soul, kind of poppy, and her new self-titled in particular channels a more stripped down, loose, intimate feel. Her past two albums are great as well. They definitely sound more uplifting and polished, but they are still very passionate and vulnerable, and very openly talk about love and relationships. And it took me a few listens to fall in love with the new album, since it sounds quite different, but I read online that this album, in contrast to the previous two, was self-produced, so every decision that went into making it was her own, and I think that's really cool and maybe explains why it's a bit looser in feel and structure. But I really love how the album has a traceable narrative to it. Bittersweet feels like the preface to a story, indicating that relationships are just that. And it seems like Read My Mind and Green Papaya are filled with infatuation and the giddiness of finding someone you really connect with, maybe to the point where you feel blinded by this love or lust. Then things kind of take a turn on Can't Fight, when, you know, things get a bit rocky, but it still sounds quite bright. Then Paper Thin's lyrics kind of talk about insecurity and almost have a codependency angle to them. She describes so well the feeling of just wanting to ignore all the red flags in a situation. And Out of Your Mind then seems to transition into the downward spiral of the relationship, followed by Weird Fishes, which is literally one of the best covers I've ever heard. I unironically love Radiohead, and I think, you know, it's pretty ambitious to try and cover a song by them and capture the essence of it while also putting your own twist on it. But I think she does it so well, and I almost like this version better than the original. And Please Don't Make Me Cry hits super hard, especially because I am an extremely sensitive person that cries at everything, and the song kind of feels like it's at the height of an argument, trying to hold back those tears. The last couple songs seem to deal with the act of finally leaving, wishing the other person well, but also dealing with the heartache and aftermath, especially on the song Courage. It's clear to see the character growth that happens from the beginning to end of the track list. It's a super raw album with very powerful and poetic songwriting and gorgeous vocals and instrumentals, and it's a really heartbreaking story that, although is pretty straightforward, it still feels really personal to her, and I truly relate with a lot of the ways she describes her pain and grief. The fact that she was able to be so vulnerable on this album but come off so gracefully, presumably being in a better place now, is so admirable and just hopeful to listen to. And I would definitely check out this album if you haven't heard it, because it is fucking amazing. Fleet Foxes are one of the handful of indie folk bands that I really like. Their music is folky, but it's also very dense and lush and grand. Like a lot of people, I think Helplessness Blues is a nearly perfect album. I really like their self-titled as well. A lot of the lyrics tend to get quite existential and philosophical and describe feelings of hope and longing. These lyrics also feel very uplifting and purifying at the same time. I think combined with the fact that Robin Pecknold's voice is so fucking pleasant, his vocals are just so passionate and endearing and add so much power to everything he says. It just gives me that rush of serotonin. The band has a way with creating a sound that feels so comforting and nostalgic, but sadly I think that their last album, Crack Up, was a little too eclectic for me. It's a mix of the convoluted song titles and lack of drums and just overall long-windedness, but luckily Shore is a completely different experience. I saw someone describe the album as like a warm hug, and I couldn't describe it any better. It definitely is a lot poppier and more instantly ear-grabbing. The opener feels like the first sight of light after a long period of darkness. It leads perfectly into Sunblind, where the lyrics make a ton of references to artists that influence and inspire our singer. Can I Believe You is one of my favorite songs from the year. The vocals and lyrics are just so fucking beautiful. A lot of this album was written during quarantine, so it contains a lot of commentary about present issues and the oversaturation of depressing news, like on Jara and Featherweight. However, the overall tone of the album is very uplifting and tries to give reassurance that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, or if not some overarching answer to everything, just a reminder to find comfort in the small things. Like he talks about on Maestranza, for example. The vocals on this song are literally so beautiful and just make my heart do a bunch of flips. Going to Sun Road is also particularly elating. It is filled with reckless optimism and hope, and to keep going until you reach that sacred place. Robin Pecknold's mind is just such a vast ocean. It feels like he has so much to say about everything, and he is such a observant, contemplative, and humble person. His lyrics are just so flowery and poetic and nice to listen to. There's something about the album that is quite boyishly optimistic, but not necessarily in a naive way, more of an aware way where you choose to focus on what's important to you and what is your reason to keep living during hard times. And I can't imagine anyone not finding the sound just extremely beautiful. It was definitely a much needed light in the darkness of the past year. So thank you, Fleet Foxes, for giving this to us. This is obviously the first new Strokes album in 7 years. I wasn't crazy about the Future Present Past EP from 2016, and I know members of the band released different things during this break as well, but the only thing I listened to and really loved was Julian's other gig, the Voids album from 2018. It definitely sounds like the Strokes, but way more experimental, and I loved it. The Strokes are a special band to me, as with most indie heads. They have some classic, timeless albums down in the books, and I had no idea how they were going to come back, especially after Come Down Machine was a pretty lukewarm album, even though I do love a few songs on it. That being said, I was hoping for something a bit more exciting with the new Abnormal, and I think that is what we got. I must say that it's pretty much everything we could have wanted from the Strokes in 2020. It's very fresh and revitalized in sound, but still sounds like the Strokes. The Adults Are Talking is such a good opener. Julian's voice hasn't aged a bit, and the guitars are so fucking catchy. Selfless is very sweet and somber. Julian's lyrics are quite shameless and lovesick, and I wish I could hit some of those high notes when singing along. Brooklyn Bridge to Chorus is really fun. I love the 80s sounding synths and the electrifying guitar riffs. And Bad Decisions is pretty cute. The melody is very uplifting, and I knew it sounded familiar because it takes from that Billy Idol song, but my only gripe is that the guitars sound kind of generic. Eternal Summer sounds very bright and lively. The lyrics paint a sort of paradise that you never want to leave, but also acknowledge it as a facade. It's like knowing a particular high won't last forever, but that you should still enjoy it while it lasts. And I wasn't crazy about At the Door at first because it's so minimal, but then I realized what is really to note here are Julian's super passionate vocals and very potent lyrics that seem to talk about feeling used in a relationship. Not the Same Anymore is definitely one of my favorite songs. I love the layered guitars so much, and also think it has one of the most powerful vocal performances along with the self-deprecating lyrics. The angsty 15-year-old will definitely always resonate with Julian's sulky and cynical tone, and as a whole, everything comes together on another great album. As much as I love it though, I think that there are some points where the music gets a little too falsely uplifting to the point where it sounds a bit cheesy, especially with such a clean and sparkly sound. But even so, I can't deny how much I go back to these songs and genuinely enjoy them. I'm not sure if it's my favorite Strokes album to date, but overall can't complain too much about it. I'm mostly just happy to have them back after all this time, and I hope that it is not the last album from them. I have known about Yeji for a while and always thought she was super dope. I enjoyed her EP2 that has Rain Girl and the Passion Fruit cover on it, and I also love the remix she did of Charlie XCX's Focus. As much as I liked her though, I never thought her music stood out too much. Her songs were just kind of easy to put on and enjoy, and were mostly pretty chill, electronic, lo-fi hip-hop songs. I guess I was kind of waiting for her to release a full project and see what she'd come up with, and I was definitely very happy with this. What We Drew is a super cool album with a lot of great ideas. It was kind of what I was expecting it to sound like in a way, so I was like like at first, but then it just kept growing on me and I could not stop replaying certain songs to death. The album goes in a few different directions. Some songs sound more low-key and ambient, kind of fuzzy and mood setting, like My Imagination and In Place, but other songs go so hard in such a weird and inconspicuous way. Like they're not super hardcore and in your face, but also still hit, like What We Drew, When I Grow Up, Money Can't Buy. If you haven't already, please listen to Money Can't Buy, like at least, because that song is so infectious. I love how she brought the rap feature on the song. It fits so perfectly. I love how she also raps a little bit too in a super non-serious way on Free Interlude. It's actually pretty catchy. I just love how she will start with like a cutesy innocent sound and then catch you off guard by turning it into something super hard and badass. Kind of like on Waking Up Down, that track has these very airy, bubbly, euphoric sound effects, but then she combines them with heavy bass and a really fun beat. And then In the Mirror is probably the most aggressive song. It's not necessarily my favorite, but I love that she took this risk, maybe went out of her comfort zone a little, and it definitely paid off. I also think the vocals are really great too across the album. I think it's cool how she sings in English and Korean, and she has a very soft, fairy-like voice that is a cool contrast to the more abrasive sound on many songs. I just love the whole album so much. I appreciate the stylistic directions that she went in and all the risks she took. I think they all worked out in her favor, and I mentioned in my mid-year post that this is the kind of album that feels like it can be played at the club, but also while chilling in your room at home at night. It definitely has that duality, and I can tell that she's really honed in her sound now, and I'm just so excited to see where she goes with it from here. I am so happy that we finally got a full-length album from Rina Sawayama. I, like many other music fans on the internet, really loved her Rina EP from 2017. It's full of really powerful, artistic pop songs where she gets really vulnerable about her feelings regarding fame and accepting herself for who she is. Talks a lot about her mental health and touches on social media in the modern age and how that affects us and our relationships with others to the deepest level. In such a short duration, we get so much of her personality, and I just love everything about her and everything she stands for. I think she's so cool and talented, but doesn't hype herself up like that. It feels like everything she does, she wants to bring us up with her. And a lot of that sentiment comes up on Sawayama, the album, as well. There are a lot of new things going on the album, most noticeably the heavier rock and metal elements. And I am obviously not a metalhead, so I can't speak on if it sounds like some kind of music appropriation thing. I think it adds a super epic quality to certain songs. XS is one of the best songs of the year. Everything about it is so satisfying and on point. Shut the Fuck Up is a great song too. It totally just makes fun of anyone she's come across that has expressed super ignorant Japanese stereotypes. And I like the contrast of the aggressive verses with the overly sweet and polite chorus. Comme des Garçons is one of my favorite songs. I can imagine it playing down a runway at a fashion show, and I like how she talks about how women should act with the same confidence and self-assuredness that men do without feeling like they're overstepping. I absolutely love the sharp and kind of sinister production on Akasaka Sad. Some other songs like Paradisen, Love Me For Me, and Fuck This World, while I do love, I feel like are a little bit trite in their messages, and not to say that they're not totally agreeable, but maybe a bit cliche and overly sentimental. But I do like the song Bad Friend because I feel like a lot of pop songs talk about love and relationships, but not about like friendship breakups, which are equally, if not more, common. So it's interesting to see that talked about, and I also think the chorus is insanely catchy. But to tie back to what I said earlier about her being big on uplifting her listeners alongside herself, I think that the closer Chosen Family is pretty wholesome and effective in doing that. And throughout the album, you can just tell she's really singing her truth, admitting she's not perfect and working on certain issues, but they're definitely things that I feel many other people can heavily relate to. Aside from that, the music itself is so phenomenal. Every song feels spectacular and like an important moment on the album. And I basically just love Rina and everything she does, and I'm just happy that she is getting more recognition now. I will admit that I was never a big fan of The Weeknd in the past, but I can't deny what a huge influence he's had on bringing R&B to so much mainstream music in the past several years. I will say that I still think with a lot of his older music, like On Trilogy and Beauty Behind the Madness, while there are some amazing songs, I find some to be particularly nauseating just by the nature of their overly intoxicating sound and just because of how explicitly sexual and horny he sounds on like every song, which tends to give me the opposite effect of what it's supposed to have, I think. But what is more interesting than that is how every album details what feels like an endless vicious cycle of two people falling in love or lust, inevitably hurting each other, and then getting back together despite all the pain they've caused each other. And I can't exactly relate to the extremes of crazy drug highs and endless hookups, but he really does translate well the appeal of being extremely hedonistic and self-indulgent without any regard for the consequences. And of course that is taken to new heights on After Hours. The songwriting and production just feels amped up to a point where I can't deny how infatuating and enrapturing it is. I think a big selling point of the album is that it's quite a bit more electronic, and many songs have a clear 80s influence, which he does really well by bringing his own futuristic and psychedelic twist to it. I love the build up to the fast and snappy beat on Too Late, and I can't get over Hardest to Love, which is my favorite song. I'm gonna sound like such a huge music noob when I say this, but the beat just really makes me think of an Aphex Twin song with Abel's vocals layered over it. Heartless is definitely the most radio friendly song, but it does slap. He just shamelessly admits that he's back on his bullshit but doesn't give a fuck and is going in with more intensity and vigor than ever. Faith is a banger too, as well as Blinding Lights. It's really hard not to get wrapped up in the adrenaline of both tracks. In Your Eyes and Save Your Tears have a similar invigorating and punchy sound. And the title track is an interesting ballad. It sounds intentionally naive in a way because it's like an apology and a promise to do better. But after listening to the whole album that just came before, it's like, will you really? Overall, I just love the sound and flow of the whole album. I like how it channels throwback songs but puts a new spin on them. And lyric wise, it's clear to see the push and pull of emotions that Abel is going through, which most definitely comes with the complexity of an on and off relationship and having a lifestyle that constantly seeks immediate gratification. I think the cover represents the album really well. It's very dark and sinister, and the sound fully embraces that. As sad as it is to say, it does seem like him going through these internal processes and expressing his emotions about them makes for really good music. So it's very bittersweet, and I hope he gets better, but we'll just have to wait and see where he goes from here. Nicholas Starr is mainly known for his abstract ambient music, while Against All Logic is his more disorderly side project. And I know Nicholas Starr released 2 albums under his name this year as well, but I personally have not yet been able to get into those because I am a noob about ambient music, and his cryptic, enigmatic style is especially challenging for me, but my amateur ears will get there soon enough. But for now, I'm definitely down with his Against All Logic stuff, which takes on a more industrial house music, deconstructed club approach. I loved his debut 2012 to 2017, which I don't know if he expected to gain as much traction as it did, but there are a lot of bangers on that album. Every song is super layered and dynamic, uses a lot of distortion and sampling and collaging, and he just makes a lot of different sounds come together in ways that are unexpectedly catchy and hooky. To me, it really showed what a keen ear he has and also his versatility as an artist. And I feel like the new record 2017 to 2019 in comparison sounds more cohesive and tightly strung together, but also very aesthetically different. It's a lot more industrial and mechanical sounding. There are noises that mimic metal clanking, machinery erupting, and alarms going off. I love the opener Fantasy with the Beyonce sample. The vocals are very glitchy and skittish, but still so catchy. If Loving You Is Wrong has this really great pulsing beat that grows throughout the track, and these computerized sound effects that kind of sound like you're pressing different buttons trying to decode a message or something with an addict is fucking amazing. I love the ambient ethereal melody paired with the fast-paced clattering kind of beat. If you can't do it good, do it hard is personally a little too abrasive for me. I prefer the blaring alarm sound effect in Alarm, which is actually a banger. It sounds like some factory having a meltdown and like you need to get the fuck out. Deefers kind of feels like a continuation of that. It sounds like you're jumping through this crazy obstacle course of exploding machinery, like fending for your life. And then Faith comes in as this very eerie, fidgety song that builds a lot of tension, followed by Penny, which is another favorite. It's a bit lighter and airier and has a very captivating off-kilter beat. And You Forever is kind of the one obscure song that sounds like a typical Nicholas Starr song. So I think it was kind of his way of inserting that at the very end, which I respect. But altogether, it is such a mesmerizing album. I like it more than the first one. I enjoy how the album feels like it has this loose narrative progression to it. Nicholas Starr, again, does an amazing job of using endless, bizarre, and eclectic sounds to create such purely addicting songs. I listened to this album so much last year, and I really hope that there are more Against All Logic projects to come in the future because I cannot get enough. This is a basic pick, but please hear me out. Kevin Parker has yet to miss. Every Tame Impala project so far has been solid, and there has been a perceivable evolution of his sound over time. Inner Speaker and Lonerism, of course, have a more rugged, gritty, psychedelic rock sound and talk a lot about isolation and introvertedness. Currents is probably my favorite album. It deals with heartbreak and reluctantly welcoming change, and also has my favorite production of all three projects. It's much more electronic and bombastic in sound, and I was worried about the slow rush because I wasn't too crazy about the singles initially, but my opinion definitely changed when I listened to the whole album. It continues in the electronic vein, however, also takes on a new disco sound, especially with the way the pianos and bass sound on a lot of songs. I can see how people might feel that it's one-dimensional, but I personally find every track to be so exceptionally groovy and infatuating, especially songs like Borderline and Breathe Deeper. And what I think is equally as powerful about the album are its lyrics. They explore some new and uncharted topics for Kevin, I guess. They're topics that tend to resonate with me a lot, even though he's like 34 and I'm 22, but I feel like I could just completely understand where he's coming from when he talks about feeling lost in what he's doing and like he's running out of time and has to have everything figured out now, even though that's just not true ever. Most of the record feels like he's grappling with the concept of time, both fighting against it while also learning how to embrace it. For example, One More Year sounds like the dread of looking back on your life and feeling like you haven't progressed. But then Instant Destiny talks about just wanting to live recklessly and in the moment. And I like how on track he talks about feeling like despite how hard he works, he's not doing enough, which I feel like is the ultimate struggle for everyone, but especially if you have artistic aspirations. I appreciate the brutal honesty on Is It True, where he talks about the unreliability of love and devotion, even though he's like married now. But I also love the electronic Daft Punk-esque bit in the chorus. And I was really struck by It Might Be Time, where he says, all my friends are growing up and moving on. I must be missing something because I just want to keep this dream alive for now, because it seems to show how he feels like he might be on the wrong path even this far down in his career. It's a very unfiltered look at someone who seems to have succeeded so much, but no matter what, will always have these feelings of doubt and dissatisfaction with how much they've done. And I really appreciate him expressing that sentiment in such an honest way. I'm not saying these are the most new and original sentiments ever, but the delivery combined with the music is so impactful and hard-hitting to me. The album has endless bops and truly makes me feel a little more at peace with where I'm at right now, and reminds me to trust the process with everything I want to do in life, which was just extremely hard to keep in mind in 2020 in particular. So I think that's why I love this album so much and kept returning to it all throughout last year. And yeah, it is honestly my #1 album of 2020. I really was hoping to make this video shorter than last year's, but that obviously did not happen whatsoever. So I'm really sorry that this was so long, but I hope that you enjoyed it or some parts of it. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts on certain albums, and maybe they made you want to check out some stuff that you wouldn't have listened to otherwise. If you want to keep following what I think about music and other new releases this upcoming year, you can check out my blog. That'll be in the description. And I just hope that the collective hope from the entire world for a better year will manifest itself in 2021. Yeah, fingers crossed. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you maybe in another end of the year video or some other video that I decide to make in the future. But yeah, thank you again. Have a good day and see you on the flip side. Goodbye.